Hello, today I'm going to show you how to paint a river estuary. I've got a quick sketch for reference, and you have to be quick because the tide's going in and out. And now I've got a smoother piece of paper than the sketch. I'm just wetting the sky where I want the clouds to be so that the paint goes in more lightly. Just a suggestion. I want the water to be the focal point, so just putting a plain sky in as a background. Cerulean blue's a nice gentle blue for a summer's day. I'm now going to put the first hillside in of this one, and it's catching the sunlight. Well, this one's in shade, so I'm going to start with delicate colours. Yellow ochre is always a good one. Just gently claim some of the space. And then when I've got the space, I can go in a little bit darker with some nooks and crannies. Near the coast you often get very orangey rocks and as lichen, and then as it comes inland a little bit it's more in shadow. And I'm going to use a homemade grey for that. Homemade grey, because it's got three other colours in that will be used, it'll harmonise quite nicely. I'm just claiming the space of the first hillside that's catching the sunshine with light warm colours. I will put a list of the colours I've used for each area in the description. If you decide on warm colours, add a little bit of yellow or earth colours to them. And if you want a cool shady area, add a little bit of blue. I started at the horizon because I wanted that to be the focal point. I'm now working my way back, putting in the rocks by the tide line, and I start by putting a sideways line in and then going up and down with the brush to put in darker lines to show that it's jagged rock. I'm now moving over to the other side of the estuary, and there's grass on top of sand dunes. So I'm getting the darker, greener grass at the top first to claim the shape. And then I'm going to mix warmer colours down through to Naples yellow where it gets nearer the beach. I don't really want a harsh line at the top, so I'm just using plain water on a brush just to loosen the green to give a lost edge. Having set the colour scheme with the sky and the start of the hillsides, I'm now going to put the water in where the estuary meets the sea at the horizon, and that's very important. It's bright because it leads you into the picture. So I'm mixing a really vivid blue with French ultramarine and Viridian. I'm using a #1 brush because it's quite a small scale picture and it has to be a reasonably straight line. I'm now working the paint back towards the sandbars and letting the colour down slightly so it's not quite as strong as the horizon, just a little bit more water in the same paint. I've given the sky a second coat of cerulean blue just to make it a bit warmer, and I'm now going to do the same with the hills. When it's a big estuary like this, you need to build the colours up gently. I've just got a little bit more yellow ochre on the brush, and I'm going to go over the headland again. Just put a few nooks and crannies in, and the rock goes all the way around the corner up, and it's still quite yellow, which is probably the lichen. And then add some raw umber at the bottom and a little bit of blue just to make it a bit darker. Just give a suggestion of rocks, just doing slightly diagonal strokes. And there's also an area on the top that's with a little bit of brown. Then I can continue the cliff all the way along, just very gently, because it's a long way away. And then go back and do up and down strokes on it just to give it a rock-like look. Now moving up to the top again, I'm just going to put some warm colours on that, sap green and Naples yellow, and just put some of the hillside on that's got lots of gorse Just bring it forward towards the rock. For the gorse, I've used a bright yellow, and I'm now going along with some dark green, putting it next to it, just to give a good contrast. It doesn't matter that it's still wet, it will find its own route. And the hedge goes all the way across the field, which is a nice way of breaking it up. Just drop the dark green in. And anything that's dark like this will make everything else look brighter. Then there's lighter green underneath it, so I'll just use the sap green, just drop some in. And if necessary, I can highlight that when it's dry, but that looks a reasonable hillside. And then coming forward, this is very, very dark, it's in shadow. So first of all, I'm going to use a bigger brush and put the field in. And depending what the crop is, the fields can be any shade of green. So I'm just mixing a couple of colours here and just adding some blue just to send it back again, because it is in shade and it is a different crop. And a little bit of Naples yellow just to push it back. I just want it to look darker than the field at the back, but I don't want it to look out of place. And I'm just going to get a little bit stronger paint and a little bit more blue on the brush and just drop the paint in. And the same on the top. And it'll find its own way and make the field look more natural. Add the brown rock in the area where the cliff meets the beach. So I'm going to use very dark brown as it's slightly nearer. Just different mix to the previous one, just to try and separate it. And then further up, it's much lighter. A double layer here. I'm now going to move back to the rock. The rock is almost orange on top with all the lichen. So I'm going to find something to map it off against, and it seems to come level with this gap in the colours here. So I'm just going to put a little hat on it. Pull the paint down to a lozenge shape, and it's got quite brown edges in some places and grey in others, so I'm just gently going to put some brown in, and on the other side it's not quite so much, probably gets washed by the sea more. And then bring it round, just a few jagged edges. Now I'm going to bring it up a little bit. It's all lost and found edges, and it's quite light on top, so I'm going to get a clean brush and just pull a little bit back. Still with a little brush, I'm going over to the beach here, which is very, very pale. One colour affects another one, so the beach looking pale might make some of the rocks look a little bit dark, so I can, if necessary, take some paint off. Going to get a clean brush and just pull some back from the top, because it is paler there, it's much drier and catching the sun. While I'm there, I'll just put a little bit of darker green here. So I'm using indigo and some chrome yellow, just mixing a really dark green on top of the sand dunes. And that's almost a straight line. There's probably a path or something there. Now use some water, a slightly damp brush, and just pull it forward to a lost edge. because it's quite thin grass on top of the sand. So I'll just put some colours in, but it's not a lawn, so I'm leaving gaps. And then just add some lemon yellow, which will push some of the paint back and leave highlights as though it is more patchy because it's growing on sand, hasn't necessarily taken everywhere. Now I can come back to this side. I can use the same indigo mix. It's very, very dark here, it's in shadow. Let's go up to the line first. Doesn't matter if it's catching the tooth of the paper because it's not necessarily an even surface. It's the edge of the cliff. And there's a little bit of brown showing through. So what I can do is just put some odd colours in with the brush. I'm changing back to the number 1 brush because it's a very thin hedge line. I don't want it quite as dark. And again, that goes up on the hillside. There's a little gap for a gate. And there's a tiny bit of hedge over there as well. Hardly anything, so I'm just going to go with a clean brush and just push that back a little bit. And I'm going to put the rough shape of the sandbars in before I put any more water in. Just with very weak Naples yellow, just to claim the space. So I'll start with the big one in the middle. But the water does sort of fall back from them and leave like a sucked edge as though it's been drained, and that leaves a contour. It's not a flat area, it's round. So I'll start with just putting the shape in, and then I'll build up the roundness with different tones, some lighter and some darker, to make it look curved. I can't use a bigger brush because I'll lose the corners. I just need to persevere with the small one for a minute. Now I still want the focal point to be the horizon, so I've got to be careful that I don't make the middle bits too bold. You've got to be careful when you're painting on the spot that the tide's coming in rapidly or going out rapidly, that everything changes. Make this a bit weaker towards the middle. I'm going backwards now because it overlaps. And then it's a nice sandy beach on the other side. And some sand over this way as well. So now I've just got this first one to put in, which I'm going to use a slightly bigger brush for. And it's half in shadow. So I'm going to do the light part first. Pull the paint back. So I don't want it to be too dominant because I want people to look into the picture, not stop at the first sandbar. And there's lost edges here where it's changing colour as it gets more wet. So for the brown area, I'm going to use raw umber. So I want a cool brown, but I need to warm it up in certain places. Most paint boxes come with raw umber, but if you haven't got it, anything that's a cool brown, and if you haven't got one, just add a little blue and it'll make it cooler. Now I've got to let that dry before I can do any more, otherwise I'll lose the definition of the sandbars. Now I've got to let that dry before I can do any more, otherwise I'll lose the definition of the sandbars. I've got it all nice and dry now, so I'm going to warm up the dunes on the right, just add some chrome yellow or any yellow that you've got. Just do some strokes in a different direction and just warm it up a little bit. I'm going to use some yellow ochre as well, make it a bit richer. There's a little bit of scrub in some areas. Just drop wet into wet so that it gives a bit of a change. Changing to a more sap green to drop in. And then the sand showing at the bottom here. So I'm just going to bring Naples yellow back in again. Stopping short on the right because there are some buildings to put in, only to suggest, so I'll leave space for the roofs. So the next stage is to bring the water a little bit forward. So I've still got the watercolour made up. When you're doing this, don't rush to clean your palette too quickly. And this time I'm going to just move the water a little bit further near the cliffs on this side. It disappears to infinity. Then it reappears here. I'm going quite gently, and I want the horizon to be dominant, so I'm making the paint a bit weaker here. And then I'll go around the sandbars and just make sure that they're a good shape and put in some highlights. Some of them have got a hint of pink and others a hint of blue or purple with a little bit of standing water. Just go very gently. And some of it does look a bit green where there's sand showing through the water. By making it pale, I'm still looking at the horizon. Just go to a point at the end of the sandbar. Always use your finger if you want to. And then coming forward, it's a little bit darker, so I'm just going to mix all my blues together and put in a dark streak, which seems to just disappear halfway along. I'll get some water and just give that a gentle edge. It's just the way that the channel's slightly deeper at that point. And the dark line does actually come all the way to the edge of my reference. So I mix up some stronger paint and just add it in. And there's another sandbar it's going round. And it's very, very dark on the final bank over on the other side. I'll just mix a little bit more French ultramarine in. Then almost turquoise in the middle. It's where all the different channels of different depths and different speeds with the current. So I'm just going to use some cobalt turquoise in there, which is quite transparent, so it's not going to detract from the skyline that I wanted to keep. It's a little bit darker in one place, so I'm just going to drop some blue in to where it's wet, just as a hint. Quite a few lines here. And then coming forward, some sort of mid colour, and it's quite narrow in the middle because the sandbar's going down. So what I'm going to do is put the nearish part of the water in and then go back and move the sand a little bit, because it really is very thin. And it changes direction completely here to go to the point. And there's a very dark area of brown, I don't know whether it's mud or wet sand, that I've got to put in as well. So coming back this way is turquoise again, because it's very, very shallow. Lots of wet sand showing. And so I want to keep this line quite thin because there's graded sand on the other side of it. Then coming forward, there's a lot of current, so what I'm going to do is use a bigger brush try and show the ripples, every imaginable colour here, with the wind catching the water, just leaving marks. Add some Paynes grey to the mix for where it's in really deep shadow over here. It's not all over, it's just in places, so a big brush is quite a good way to just get the pattern of the water. Then I'm going to add some cerulean blue because it's quite light in the middle, it's catching the reflection of the sky. Just warm it up a little bit. Just changes every few feet. And then when that's dry, I can go across it again with a dry brush with a slightly different colour and just highlight it a little. I've just highlighted a few things now they're a little bit dry. I've added some pink to this second sandbar that's just glistening in the sun and a little bit of standing water on it. And then the third sandbar that's catching the sun is quite bright, so I've just added another layer of paint to that. I'm completely stuck now till it's dry, so I will wait patiently and then highlight it. I'm now going to use a number 8 flat brush, or the biggest flat brush you've got, and put in some more lines. And it's just easier to do with a big flat brush because you don't want lots of sweeps. You want it to, your mark to count. So I'm just going in very gently. Feathering off the edges. And it's not the same colour all the way across. There's different currents and areas of water, so it's lighter in the middle. So I'm going to go in with a smaller brush, just feather it off in the middle. And it is tidal, so it's lipping the sand in different places. And then moving forward, it's much, much lighter. So I'm going to just put some yellow ochre and Naples yellow on the water and the sand, just to show that there's a difference. Then with a clean brush, just bring it forward. Then further back here, it's in shade and the water is very dark. So I'm going to use a smaller flat brush and just mix some indigo with the French ultramarine. Just wet it down a little bit so it's not quite so strong. Dry the brush and then just pick some up and put in the current. Just very gently, just showing that the wind's picking it up. And it looks more shady because it's a different mix of paint. The paint in the background in the sunshine is warmer because it's got green in it, where this is just blues and greys. And then there's some more over here. What I want is to take the focal point of the picture to the horizon. The water always reflects the sky, so I've got some cerulean blue here and I'm just going to pop that in. Just different strokes, just showing the broken water surface. I'm moving it forward because it's a sunny corner. Not too much on the brush at once. And there's also some just obviously through a gap in the clouds in the middle, but not quite so strong. Just pop that in. And where the water goes against the sandbank, it is quite shallow at the edge, so there are areas that look just sand colour really. The sandbars do change shape when you're painting when the tide's going in and out. But you just have to decide what you're going to put in. And this sandbar, it's slightly deeper colour on the far side. So I'm just using a little bit of yellow ochre where the rest of it is Naples yellow. And there's a few areas that are slightly darker. Just make up some more Naples yellow and just go gently in the middle. Put the paint down and then move the paint around. Well, I hope you've enjoyed watching this video. We got the first picture, which was a sketch on very rough paper. The very rough paper is very good for hillsides, but not so good for doing sandbars and exact detail because the brush skips over the tooth of the paper. This one is smooth and it has a different effect. You have to work a bit harder on the hillsides, but the sandbars are much better. Thank you for watching.